Friday night meant all of us met up and we'd be styling, fixing to dance the Madison and jive like there was no tomorrow. Back in the days when a bitch was a dog and nigger was a fighting word. And all the Canadian guys would stand around in posture and toss a dance challenge to the American GIs who came to town to take all their girls. Not that they wanted us black girls before the American GIs came on the scene. Back in the days when a bitch was a dog and nigger was a fighting word.
Tell us a little bit about why you became a writer.
I was forced. I was forced into becoming a writer because I was an actor who wasn't getting work because of, typecasting, and I played, 100 whores and maids and everything. And I thought, this is crazy, I've been to theater school, I've done, paid my dues, and I don't want to do that anymore. So I thought, how can I work? And I thought, well, I'll write my own stuff. They can't say that I can't do my own stuff. So that's how it started. I think my first book, Stay Black and Die, actually birthed this little baby. And it was just more about being on the journey, the whole family, and the family meaning generational family. Mm-hmm. And from coming here, who knows when, probably 1700s, to being here now. And the main character in the story, which comes from the other book, Stay Black and Die, is a lot of it seen through her eyes, but in this book a lot of it seen through her sister's eyes and her mother's eyes and her grandma's eyes, and just stories that were out there. So
right. So you grew up in Winnipeg.
Mm-hmm.
And you said you were the only kind of black family.
Yeah,
in a pretty
kind
much
of
all
only
white
black
area?
family in our neighborhood. There were a few black families, but unlike Toronto or Halifax, we didn't have a community like that lived together in the same area. So we were the only black family like in our part of the north end of Winnipeg where I grew up. Then there was Ukrainians and French and Jewish. I mean, it was kind of like Vancouver and the east end of Vancouver. But yeah, we were it for representing.
And how do you think that sort of affected you?
I think, it's made me really tough, and it's made me really realize what friends are, and that I'll take with me forever. Mm-hmm. So I really can't pay it back for that. There were other stuff, that made you, self-conscious, that made you, go like this. So your lips wouldn't look like, bigger than all the other girls on the street and things like that. But, yeah, it made me, gave me character. Like, now I know what it means that whatever doesn't kill you makes you strong,
Sure.
Yeah. I want them to take away sort of two things, I guess. Something that they didn't know and couldn't have guessed, but also at the same time something that they knew, that they were really familiar with. Like, a lot of the stories could be somebody else's story with different slants and stuff, but wow, really? Hey, that happened to her. Hey, that happened to them. I didn't realize that. I want a lot of things to go on in their head. I want a lot of conversation, And some of the good things that happened for me personally is that, people have seen me, read or perform, and said, wow, I really like you, which is, sort of the Sally Fields kind of, do you really? And the best thing I think that's happened to sort of make me feel that, my work is a piece of important literature, a piece of history, recorded, and that hasn't been recorded before, is that it's been recently added onto some curriculums in universities, on English and women's studies, and that's such an honor. That's so amazing, and I'm so glad. And it's actually just starting it off, Like my first book, Stay Black and Die, is just taken off now. Mm-hmm. And it's going to help this one. It's going to help back in the days because of, oh yeah, well, wasn't she, isn't she,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so it just sort of keeps rolling,
That's great. You ended up here on Commercial Drive. How come?
Oh, because everything about Commercial Drive is, in my soul. It's like from Winnipeg, from the North End, the sights, the vibrant colors, the array of people, the smells in the air, the sounds of the different languages, the colors of faces when you're walking by. It's just home. It's just so what a city should be like if you have to live in a city, It's marvelous. I love it. I love it, yeah.
That's great. That's great. Now, your publisher is a local publisher as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Wattle and Daub.
Wattle and Daub Publishing.
And tell us a little bit about them. How did you connect with these guys?
Actually, I connected with them through a writer who's a good friend of mine, Casey Wolf, and we were talking because we're in the same writers group about material that we have and stuff. And I said, I've got enough material. I could have all kinds of books. And she said, really? Do you really? And I said, yeah. And she said, why don't you get them published? And I said, yeah, but you stall when you're a writer. And she said, I'm going to hook you up with Wattle and Daub, which Susan Pincus. And they said, yeah, we'll publish it. Let's get it ready. Their purpose, their, mission is to write books that, like they say, are of the earth, of building, of community, like the structures in Africa, of Wattle and Daub and building. So it's kind of a beautiful, umbrella to be under, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. And what would you like to see happen with your writing?
I'd like Oprah to be sitting there and saying, this is the most wonderful book I've ever seen back in the days. It's by a Canadian writer. Yeah, I'd like to see it take off. I'd like to see it soar. It speaks of history that's been left out for so long, Like Black Canadian history is just like little pieces in books, if they're in it at all. And we've been here forever. Like, I'm a seventh generation, so I think it's really important that these stories are told. And they're, through all the times, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, like they go back and they come forward and, it's just, hey, you were doing that then, well, my mother was doing this then, Yeah, yeah.
Now, what does your family think about the stories in here?
There's some of my family, a few cousins who really support me, think it's wonderful. And there's others that go, why don't you write nice stuff about the North where you still have, And I think it's hard for some people to, to bare their soul. It's okay for us when we're writing, yeah, I'll tell everything, I don't care. But some people, how they've had to deal with things is different than, how you deal with it, especially now in this day and age. And so I think sometimes they'd rather let those stories collect dust in a little trunk somewhere and forget about it. But it's so important, it is, it really is. So dealing with the families kind of, you gotta put on gloves, Here we go. One night, some white guys surrounded Bunny Lane outside. I think they thought they could take on this slight-built little black guy. Boy, they sure didn't like black guys. 'Cause these days, they took all their girls and won every dance contest. No problem. Back in the days when a bitch was a dog and nigger was a fighting word. Well, Bunny didn't run, and he didn't cower, and he didn't say a word. He just backed up slowly and turned in a circle carefully to survey how many of the guys surrounding him were going to fight him. And then he took off his shoes and his socks, and he crouched down in a kung fu tiger pose and gestured with a few short, come on, bring it on motions with his hands. And all those guys took off like flies. God, I wished you could have been there. We had so much fun back in the days when a bitch was a dog and nigger was a fighting word.